heat sort of moved away, and it's become like the application layer of the entire sort of blockchain ecosystem. Not from a technical perspective, but because you have your application, you have your data availability, and you have your security staking layer. But it's the entire full stack for developers, and everything else sort of was a copy paste of Ethereum with uh, sort of minor upgradations here and there.
रिश्ते में तो हम तुम्हारे बाप होते हैं.
चलो स्टार्ट.
हेलो मित्रों, कैसे हो सब? बिटकॉइन जो है भाग रहा है. मतलब कल रात में क्या, आज सुबह अर्ली मॉर्निंग यूएस शटडाउन, फिलिबस्टर एंड करने का वोट था. मैं और क्रिप्टो डैडी बैठ के सुबह 5-6 बजे तक देख रहे थे. एक कोई बंदा था, वो जॉन कॉर्निन करके, वो बेसिकली वो रिपब्लिकन था, तो वोट जो है वो अटका हुआ था 59-40 पे, और एक वोट बस नहीं आया था. तो मालूम पड़ा कि वो बंदा जो है कहीं फ्लाइट वाइट में फंसा हुआ है, आज काम पे नहीं आया. तो दे वेटेड फॉर हिम लाइक अ फ्यू आवर्स सो दैट ही कुड कम एंड वोट. क्रेजी शिट.
आई थॉट सो गया था.
Democracy.
Yeah, that could have been you.
कुनाल होता तो लाइक अरे मेरा इंटरनेट नहीं चल रहा है, अरे
मेरा मुंजारो लगा है, आज मैं बहुत वीक हूँ, आज मैं कुछ कर नहीं सकता. पता नहीं कैसा मुंजारो लगा रहा है वो. सो हमारे क्या बोलते हैं पॉडकास्ट की जनता के लिए, अगर क्या बोलते हैं वो गुरुजी एकदम पतले होके आ जाएं तो बता देना मैं कमेंट्स में.
लेडीज के लिए टॉप सिग्नल है ये.
यस. ठीक है भाई, लेट मी शेयर माय स्क्रीन. देखते हैं आज क्रिप्टो के दुनिया में क्या हो रहा है, आज की थोड़ी ताज़ा खबरें.
अरे आई नो वन थिंग, ये प्राइसेस बढ़ी एंड जेम्स विन गॉट लिक्विडेटेड अगेन.
He was short?
Liquidated 12 times.
Of course, right? Yeah.
He short,
Yeah,
na? He got liquidated 12 times in 12 hours. And
no, so he closed his $85,000 profit, and he then opened another one जिसमें he got partially liquidated. अभी वो क्या बोल रहा है, रुक जाओ मैं दिखाता हूँ तुम्हें.
He's like, if I'm wrong, then I will ride into the sunset.
अभी वो बोल रहा है कि I'm opening more shorts and he's going to keep adding to his shorts. That's what his game plan is. Apparently उसका एक वो कल रात को tweet आया था कि I think किसी one of those KOLs posted some bullish tweet. तो उस पे उसने बोला कि you guys are these delusional bulls, तुम्हें पता नहीं है market crash होने वाली है, gold जो है वो एकदम high पे है, Nasdaq एकदम high पे है, S&P एकदम high पे है, and it's going to crash bad, and BTC is going to follow through, and that is why I'm shorting. Now tell me bulls, why are you long?
और उड़ने वाला है.
James Wynn, dude, like, I mean, that guy is, I don't know, he's trying to make back the $100 million, but I don't think कि बनेंगे. कि एक बार जो तुक्का लग गया, उसको क्या करना था कि आधे पैसे निकाल के कहीं एफडी करा देता, बड़े तरीके से घर वर खरीद लेता, इंश्योरेंस ले लेता, तो ज्यादा बेटर होता उसके लिए. ठीक है. तो लास्ट वीक बीटीसी ने क्या किया, इट बेसिकली टैग्ड इट्स 50-week moving average and then came back up, but it's still below its 20-week moving average. Most likely मैंने like obviously जब इस साइकिल में ऐसा हुआ है कि it's fallen close, done a weekly close below its 20-week moving average and then tagged its 50-week moving average, it does go back to it and does a weekly close around that, but that remains to be seen. मार्केट जो है अपनी, लोग ऐसा लगता है कि एकदम बुलिश बैठे रहते हैं, कि एक दिन के 2% मूव में दिस इज इट, आज ये मैं 100x लॉन्ग खोल रहा हूँ अभी.
तो सब अपने पुराने ट्वीट्स निकाल देते हैं, देखा
आई नो
बोला था ना.
बोला ऊपर जाएगा.
मैं तो अभी भी बोल रहा हूँ कि जो है ना, मुझे ऐसा लगता है कि ये, बिकॉज मुझे नहीं लग रहा बीटीसी में वो स्ट्रेंथ अभी भी आई है. आई मीन ये जो फिलिबस्टर बंद हुआ है, द न्यूज दैट came गवर्नमेंट शटडाउन होगी, इट शुड हैव एक्चुअली, आई मीन बाय नाउ इफ यू लुक एट हाउ बीटीसी मूव्स, इसको 110 पढ़ देना चाहिए था, but it hasn't really moved much. 104 से 106 107 पे घूम रहा है. It's still ranging between its range. It hasn't really moved out of it. jab tak it doesn't move out of, let's say, 108k, 110k, I will not be in a bullish sentiment at that point in time for the short term, as we say. Uh, I mean, if I'm opening trades, I'm probably opening it either at 110, or if it's moving down, then probably shorting it at a much lower price. But I'm not going to be trading this market. It's a very unpredictable market right now.
But S&P
Makes
अभी
sense.
open होएगा, so it could be कि आज markets rally हो थोड़ा.
Bro, the problem is कि वो rally होती है, and we've seen time and time again, ये जो Sunday pumps होते हैं ना, they wipe out on Mondays and Tuesdays, and they wipe out pretty bad, and it has happened since the last 3-4 weeks. वो चलता रहा है, and maybe today is a different day, maybe because the news of the government opening, because even the news is not really finalized. If you look at it, I mean, it still has a couple of processes that to go through. They still have some multiple votings that have to go through to get the government to reopen. It'll take, I would say, another day or so, and we don't know. Beach mein wo, the orange man comes and says something funny, and the whole thing
Yeah.
goes sideways.
I don't want this shutdown to end. I don't want this shutdown. I want these level lessons.
Right, I mean, I don't know, man. I mean, we can't trust the orange man. So I'm going to hold. I mean, like we always say, show me the chart and I will tell you the news. So we wait for the chart to tell us what the upcoming news is going to be.
परफेक्ट. तो भैया इसी पे वो क्या बोलते हैं कि कैसी और तारा थोड़ी दुखी होंगी आज, बेचारी दोनों लड़कियां. बहुत अच्छा काम कर रही थी वो. XRP पे उन्होंने टारगेट दिया था 2.02, क्या कितने का दिया था, आई डोंट नो, आई थिंक 2.02 का टारगेट.
2.05.
या तो 2.05 का टारगेट दिया था. उसी दिन दुखी हो रही थी कि यार तो 2.2 चले गया, मैंने लिया क्यों नहीं, तब तो और दुखी होगी. पर तब से छुट्टी पे है और उस बीच में मार्केट पंप कर गई. तो लेट्स सी व्हाट दिस है. उसके बाद चलो भाई ये यस, तो ये चल रहा था कल रात में शटडाउन का. yes, another interesting thing about shutdown ending is like we are going to get a lot of data coming in, government data इस week. Thursday को I think jobless claims है, CPI है, फिर PPI होगा Friday को, US retail sales है. So I mean it's going to be like a volatile week depending on what kind of data they're expecting. किसी को लग रहा है inflation नीचे जा रहा है या नहीं?
I mean, it could be like a couple of bips here and there, but I think it should be like a little bit on the higher side, I guess. I think it should be like above estimation is what I think.
But अभी भी ना ये US market, the whole market is like being moved by the US markets. यार US में जो भी हो रहा है, like the दूसरी दुनिया, like other countries haven't even like caught up. Like it's not really moving the markets as such. US में कुछ भी होता है, मार्केट इतनी ऊपर नीचे हो रही है, पर और हम इंडिया में थोड़ा सा भी पीछे चल रहे हैं, बहुत ज्यादा नहीं, थोड़ा सा. आज मद्रास हाई कोर्ट ने एंथनी के ओरिजिनल, जहां से जहां का वो निवासी है, जहां so you know right, Tony is originally from Tamil Nadu. So,
Yeah.
yes, so Madras High Court ruling has now come up with the Madras High Court has now come up with a ruling recognizing cryptocurrency as property. यानी it is a
Ooh.
bit, yeah. अब थोड़े दिन में क्या वो ALS आइस बकेट चैलेंज भी आ जाएगा, तो I don't know. ठीक है भाई. दूसरा या एक नया CME गैप खुल गया है at around 104, 103.5 या 3.8 and 104 के बीच में. So that is also something that we should be looking out for. Another thing, हाँ वो याद है उस दिन क्या बोलते हैं कि Sonic Labs का हुआ था कि they got hacked, Beats protocol got hacked, and then Sonic came out and they froze all the wallets, right? They froze all those transactions, ये वो. But the hacker, it seems like bypassed like the Sonic Labs wallet freeze. So, so that was like people were just going crazy कि क्या फायदा इतने TPS और इसका. Sonic को फिर गाली पड़ी.
Nobody cares about TPS.
Yeah. नहीं मुझे I don't understand realistically, like if you freeze the wallets, how can they like bypass that?
I don't know. I'll probably have to deep dive a bit into this because I was even looking at how everyone was probably managing the balancer hack. I have not really seen the Beats hack because when it came to the balancer hack, even the Sonic ecosystem had taken certain measures because balancer is well integrated as one of the primitives. Not as one of the primitives, but I think a lot of dexes have forked it and deployed it on Sonic as well. But ideally, if your wallet has been blacklisted on a particular chain, it's practically impossible to bypass that. But it'll depend on how the contract is structured. But I think the way Sonic handled the Balancer Act, it's pretty straightforward in terms of the blacklist measures that they have of wallets. I'll have to dig deeper in terms of what this attacker has done, but it's unless or until he's swapped it for some other asset, etc. Because on a particular chain, the only thing that you can do, and so especially in an L1, right, the only control that you have over an attacker is if the assets are still held in the chain's native asset, which is the gas token. If the person has switched it out, there's practically nothing that you can do. Unless or until he switched it for a USDT or something or a USDC, because both of them are effectively centralized, right? But other than that, if he swapped for a wrap teeth, there's practically nothing that you could do. Yeah, if he would have held it in Sonic, he would have definitely been blacklisted. But I think in this particular case, he probably would have swapped it or washed it into multiple assets, which is why. Because in case of the balancer hack, the funds were sitting idle in a couple of sort of chains. Out of the $132 million, I think 132 or 125, whatever the size of the hack was, 70 million or odd was on Ethereum held in ETH, and ETH obviously is fully decentralized unless or until the validators sort of get together and decide to punish the attacker. There's nothing that they can do. But $70 million is too less an amount in terms of what ETH is managing, so they probably let that slide. But the other ecosystems where the hack sort of permeated into the remainder 50 odd mil, they were all contained because the assets were held idle in the chain's native token assets. So they were sort of contained from that perspective. And Sonic, for that matter, did blacklist. So yeah, I think in this particular case, the attacker must have washed out into multiple other assets.
ठीक है, चलो L1s की बात कर ही रहे थे तो आज थोड़ा L1s पे डीप डाइव करते हैं. लाइक यानी नॉर्मल चीजें तो ऑब्वियसली सबको मालूम ही है कि ब्लॉकचेन क्या है, ये वो. एक तो लेट्स स्टार्ट विद देयर आर सो मेनी चेन्स एंड देयर सो मेनी मेट्रिक्स. नरकुंडी, तू बता रहा था कि कौन कौन सी चेन अभी टॉप पे चल रही है और उनके क्या क्या मेट्रिक्स हैं. लाइक TVL कितना है, व्हाट मैटर्स, लाइक व्हिच आर द टॉप चेन्स करंटली.
इस पे मैंने देखा Defillama पे there are more than 200 chains listed right now. L1s on Defillama, legit ones. Which brings up a question like how many L1s can you? It's almost like a running meme on CT that what we need is more stable coins, what we need is more chains. But when you start looking at the concentration of the liquidity, it's not shocking, but I mean the depth of how concentrated it is, that I think might be surprising to a few folks. So let's open up. Can you see my screen?
Another presentation, please. Yes, show us another presentation. Bore us to death
slide
with
one.
That. Yes.
Slide one. What is an L1?
दिख रहा है कि नहीं दिख रहा है?
Thankfully नहीं दिख रहा है मुझे.
मुझे बस वो एक लाइट तेरे टकले पे एकदम सेंटर में चमक रही है, मुझे वो दिख रही है. आई डोंट नो व्हाई. लाइक हाउ. नहीं, ऊपर कर मुंह पर कर. हाँ, ये देखिए एकदम टॉप.
ऑल नेचुरल.
एक सेकंड, अपना टकला तू वापस नीचे कर. यार, यू रिमेंबर ब्रैम स्टोकर्स ड्रैकुला? उसमें वो अजीब सा उसका टकला होता है और साइड पे
I don't know. I don't watch mainstream movies. Anyways. Anyways.
Last movie you watched was Dracula की मोहब्बत.
Okay, Defillama दिख रहा है chains का? Yes, no, maybe.
Yeah, दिख रहा है.
Okay, excellent.
अरे नहीं दिख रहा. अरे नहीं दिख रहा भाई.
अरे यार. Fuck sake.
यार इसको कंट्रोल क्यों देते हो यार?
Oh yeah,
अब दिख रहा है.
देखा?
Yes, yes, yes.
Alhamdulillah. Okay, so first thing on TVL, ETH is still the biggest and most serious protocol when it comes to managing TVLs. Everything else combined is just over 80%, sorry, less than 20%. And ETH itself, TVL is 77%. So if you start looking at timeline, 2020 peak NFTs, uske baad there wasn't much happening, and I think May 2022, I think, Ritvik, is when Ethereum moved from proof of work to proof of stake.
yeah.
So at that point, ETH started becoming yield-bearing assets. Also, L2 started climbing up in share. But if you compare the two big buckets, EVM versus non-EVM, it's still 90% of the TVL is locked in EVM chains. And the rest of it is between Sui, Move, Near. But yeah, majority of it is over there itself.
Second biggest कौन सा है? Solana.
Solana now, okay, so Solana, okay, one interesting point. I think in this cycle, if you want to call it, Solana has been the breakout. I mean, look at the TVL dry up completely in 2023. It was like down to less than 1%, and now it's about 7% of more than 7% of TVL on everywhere. And also, if you start looking at the DEX volumes, so ETH obviously is the king, 77 billion in TVL. Solana is just 10 billion. But when you start looking at DEX volumes, Solana ka 30-day DEX volume is 140 billion compared to 128 for Ethereum, which kind of tells us that for ETH, it's more of a long-term staking, yield-bearing asset that you want to hold on for longer. For Solana, it's much more smaller in size, but the transactions are happening more frequently and obviously in volume. Like Pumpka itself, last year they produced 16 million tokens. So the volume activity is going over there, while the more, long-term, staking your ETH, using it as going to, liquid staking protocols, that is more of a long-term game for pure DeFi use. And that's still going to be in ETH, especially with TradFi adoption.
तेरे ट्रम्प और मिलानिया ये सारे मीम्स भी तो सोलाना पे ही है.
Yeah, so a lot of this volume could be probably Radium and Jupiter volume.
Yeah.
All of it is Radium and Jupiter volume.
Yeah.
Let me rephrase my statement.
ठीक है. अच्छा, रियलिस्ट चलो अपन बात करते हैं. व्हाट एक तो लाइक व्हाट का ये जो इतनी सारी ब्लॉकचेन्स हैं, so they have like all different programming languages, right? Not all of them, but like there are few, 2-3 that are main. So what are those languages? And suppose if I'm like just a newcomer, मैं अभी निकला हूँ college से and I want to get into this industry, so what is like the most beneficial, what would be the most beneficial language that I can basically get myself refined, pick up that skill to get into this industry, जब मुझे काम मिले?
So there are, I would say, four odd, right? I don't quite remember the fourth one because it's like seldom used. I think Dot used it quite a bit, and Chain Spaceman Dot. Maybe Crypto Daddy would know this because he's built on Dot as well. But Solidity is obviously the most popular one, right? Which is something which is used by all EVM compatible chains because the Ethereum virtual machine was written using Solidity, and that's the prevalent code for the Ethereum virtual machine. So that's the one which is the most popular, right? And popular, why? Because Solidity is what is housing most of the assets in the world of blockchain today, right? Because ETH has most of the amount of TVL, and ETH is the chain for the institutions, right? So they're adopting that. Second, you have Rust, right, as a programming language, which is used by the likes of Solana, which is used by the Cosmos ecosystem, right? So all of these folks use Rust. A couple of new chains which are built um, on Cosmos as well, using their SDKs also use Rust, right? Solidity is obviously, you'll find the most amount of developers for Solidity, then you'll probably find for Rust. I think Starknet, which was also by, I think he was one of the co-founders who launched NL2. For Starknet, they came up with their own programming language, which was called Cairo. So again, a very uncommon one. Then you also have Move, which is something which is very popular these days, which is used by all the Move-based chains. So, for example, you have a Sui, you have an Aptos, you also had Movement. I don't know what they're doing, what they're up to. I think those founders also sort of left. But
Redemption
yeah,
arc.
these are the prevalent sort of programming languages that there are. But yeah, Solidity is the most common one. So if somebody were to be thinking about stepping in, I think the first place to start would be Solidity, right? Because the code base, the libraries, the kind of existing contracts that exist, which helps you to learn a lot, right? So there's a lot of repository available on Solidity as is. On the Move side, it's actually being, so Move was effectively created by the Facebook blockchain team, right, which kind of left and made Sui, etc., right? So they're the ones who came up with that programming language. It's more geared for modern day applications, etc. But like I said, I mean, Solidity is also improving on a day by day basis. But where we are at, I think if somebody were to just join in, I think Solidity is the place to start. That's the one that gives you the most amount of research tools available and existing code bases for you to look at.
अच्छा एक और चीज बता अब obviously like Bitcoin is also its own blockchain, right? And Ethereum is
Yeah.
also. Why don't people build on Bitcoin? Like a lot of people ask this, right? कि जब BTC ही जब it's so revered as a blockchain, why don't people use it, or why can't people use it to build like they can on Ethereum?
So for that, you have to be. It's a pretty much a technical sort of an answer because the states available on the Bitcoin chain is very simple, right? Because what you're looking at is very basic because it was essentially peer-to-peer money transfer. That's exactly what it was for. So whenever you're transacting between people, an immutable ledger of those entire transactions. That simple as that. That's what, like if you look at the Bitcoin white paper, it was basically a peer-to-peer sort of a cash transfer mechanism, right? That's what it was. I forgot the exact title of the white paper, but that's what it was, right? Peer-to-peer. And so the states, as in what sort of data are you dealing with, which is effectively stored on the blockchain? What sort of data or what size of data can actually be stored on the blockchain? That is what effectively defines the kind of applications that you can build. Ethereum, on the other hand, which is effectively a fork of Bitcoin, essentially, right? Ethereum came with this added-on advantage, which was the virtual machine, right? The virtual machine, again, a decentralized sort of machine, which allows you to deploy more complex contracts because obviously the state of the kind of data that the blockchain can store, process, etc., was wider, right? And the virtual machine allowed you to run these contracts on the blockchain itself. So ETH was effectively built for complex applications. Bitcoin never was, right? I mean, somebody, if they want, they can sort of expand, and many people have tried this as well, right? So they can sort of hard fork BTC and sort of expand its use case. But the idea is you can be one person who's hard forked it and you could probably be the only user, right? Because I think the world has found different use cases for both, right? And there is a particular use case for BTC, which is what people use it for, which is just store of value. And when it's store of value, I obviously want to be able to transact with it as well. So if I have, say, $1 million in stored value, I want to be able to buy a house with it. So I should be able to transfer the store of value from one person to the other. So the blockchain can store that wallet A has transferred it to wallet B. That's all it's going to store, right? It's not going to store anything else. Whereas on ETH, you can take that $100, deposit it somewhere, get a loan against it, have an interest rate for that particular loan. So the blockchain is storing all of this information, right? The person A has deposited $100 worth of collateral. What is that collateral? That collateral could be any ERC20 token, right? It could be an ERC721 NFT also, right? With certain properties of its own. and this person has collateralized it at $100, and he has borrowed $50 against it, right? And he or she is paying maybe so and so interest rate every 8 hours, which could be a funding. So all of this information is stored on every block, right? And it's being validated by all the validators. So it's because Ethereum was built with expanded use. So people have sort of accepted that BTC serves a purpose of store of value and transfer of value between one another. Ethereum is that blockchain which allows for complex and much more wider sort of utilizational applications which can be built on it, and that's why people use that. And everything else from ETH onwards, right? So again, on the BTC side, there were multiple forks as well. For example, like Litecoin, etc., were all effectively forks of that. Like a GasFi thing was also a fork of it, right? Because all of these have these halvings, right? So they all go through the same thing, which is effectively proof of work. ETH was also essentially that, but then ETH sort of moved away, and it's become like the application layer of the entire sort of blockchain ecosystem. Not from a technical perspective, but because you have your application, you have your data availability, and you have your security staking layer. But it's the entire full stack for developers, and everything else sort of was a copy paste of Ethereum with sort of minor upgradations here and there.
Got it. टोनी यार तू कौन से L1s track कर रहा है, or which of them are like sort of making, we have established कि Ethereum is the blockchain, right? Even with all the EVM chains and multiple partnerships, like most of the institutions are going to gravitate towards Ethereum. But just in terms of like L1 tokens and use cases, is there anyone else who's doing like a good work other than Ethereum, and which ones are you tracking?
Yeah. So L1 के अंदर there are two things to track, right? So Adil said, the TVL that is getting locked, right? So the general idea is that the more TVL gets locked, the chain has more sort of use cases available. The chain has more money pouring in. So people sort of look towards those chains to sort of, if you're investing into any of these tokens, you might want to invest into a token that is having a high TVL, right? But then we've time and time seen that there are chains that have had some really high TVLs locked in, and the chains, the tokens don't really perform well, right? And the reason behind it is people most of the time mistaken, okay, if there is TVL, it is supposed to push the price up, right? It's not always the case, and it doesn't necessarily mean that way. It all comes down to what sort of consensus the chain is using, right? So when we're talking about the difference between Bitcoin and Ethereum, right? So you have proof of work and proof of stake. And if you see Ethereum's TVL sort of increased once they moved to proof of stake, right? So you had a lot of people coming in, staking in, becoming, getting those revenues from being a validator. And basically that allows the network to be faster and scalable and so forth and so on. And that was the reason why they moved from POW to POS. And we see so many chains coming in, and they're all trying different things. So the basic one was proof of work in BTC. Just where you had people doing those puzzles and sort of validating those transactions based on that. So it was proof of work. And then you had proof of stake, where you could put in your basic token of the chain, stake it, and then basically put your consensus on to validating the block and confirming the block and so forth and so on. And now those chains have evolved into something even higher. So you have delegated proof of stake. You have XRP having their own sort of consensus. They have the Ripple consensus. You have ICP having their own sort of consensus. They're all different ways of how they're validating the blocks. And one of the things that you want to look at is, if I'm looking at a long-term investment, right, into a chain, what are these chains eventually going to do in the longer run? Are they really going to scale as fast or as harder as Ethereum has done so far? If I'm looking at any other chain besides Ethereum, right? That is my thought process of investing in a chain. So the reason now I would look at Solana, right? Why? Because it's not just the TVL; it's also the sort of consensus system that they have, right? They have a mixture. So they have proof of stake and they have proof of history, right? It's their own native sort of consensus system they've built. And what it does is basically it timestamps every transaction. So basically, every transaction, when it's passed on from one person to another, it has a certain timestamp. and that sort of confirms before even validating or confirming the transaction ahead. So, like, we were discussing that how it works is mostly like how an L2 does. Okay, they group the transactions together and push it out. It's somewhat similar, not exactly that, but somewhat similar to that. So you have timestamps, so you're not waiting in line for those transactions to go ahead, and that is why Solana has been so fast, right? Why meme coins have actually excelled on Solana is because of this sort of mechanism that they have in place. It's like a hybrid proof of stake, proof of history mechanism. So when you're looking at chains, I look at chains who have some sort of long term. So I look at, so besides Ethereum, I'm looking at Solana. I'm looking at, and I'm an XRP maxi, so I look at XRPL, the XRP ledger itself, right? People don't call it a chain, but essentially it is a chain, right? It has its own consensus system. Yes, they don't assign validators outside their native system, so they have very limited banks and financial institutes basically giving a consensus on the validation of the block. So it's more centralized to say. It's not your usual DeFi chain or decentralized chains. So XRP is there. One of the last call I discussed, ICP. It's a very underrated chain. It has high potential, I think. Just yesterday, I was reading the news that Coinbase wants to move their transactions on the ICP ledger. I don't know what that means or how they're going to do that, but they basically want to move their services on ICP. So you have all these, and then you have Sui. Recently, we've seen a massive surge on Sui as well. Also because again, they bought something different, something that makes the chain faster. They have their own consensus system. They call it Misteketi or something like that. It's a different sort of consensus system. It works like a web, very difficult to explain. I also don't understand it completely, but yeah. So the idea is I pick up chains that have more long term sort of vision in mind, and of course ETH is always going to be daddy, but you'll have a lot of these I would say 5, 6 to 8, 10 chains that will come up with something really new, something fast, which in the future, the way we're moving into with the whole crypto with the system, things are going to get faster. We would want higher TPS, we would want lower gas fees, and this is what all these chains are building. So my picks are XRP, Solana, ICP. I would look at Cardano also. They're doing pretty good stuff there as well. um, I That's pretty much it. I mean, hyper chain. I don't know what's the hype about it. I haven't really looked into that much, but I think that's also getting up. Then one more thing that you can look into is also these new chains, ZK, zero knowledge proof chains that are coming in. Recently, because of all these whale tracking on Hyperliquid and everybody, knowing exactly what's happening, people are now moving towards more privacy chain sort of things. That's become a narrative this cycle also somehow. So maybe they could be something you can look into.
Got it. क्योंकि हम देसी हैं और अगर हम पॉलीगॉन के बारे में बात नहीं करेंगे तो इट वुडंट रियली बी राइट. तो अभी बीच में एक्चुअली क्या संदीप नायवाल चले गया था राइट पॉलीगॉन से, एंड देन ही इज बैक राइट. लाइक कुछ दिया कि उसने क्यों गया था और क्यों वापस आया. लाइक इज ही जस्ट बिकॉज पॉलीगॉन नॉट डूइंग वेल दैट ही इज बैक, और इज इट लाइक जस्ट कि मैं बोर हो रहा था मैं इसलिए वापस आ गया. बट इज पॉलीगॉन डूइंग एनीथिंग? बीच में दे हैड अ लिटिल बिट ऑफ अ हाइप पिकिंग अप, बट अगेन देव गॉन साइलेंट. Who wants to take
Polygon ka beach mein, like probably 22 or something, like they had some brand partnership with Starbucks and others focusing on NFTs as such, but I don't think those real life partnerships took them anywhere. And Sandeep Nairwal ka jo comeback tweet tha, I mean, it was very long, but essentially he said that it needs Polygon needs more focus, and like doing fewer things, but doing them in a better way, changing team structure, and obviously that means that he has to be more involved. So that's what I understood from his comeback tweet.
Polygon for me, Polygon or Matic, whatever you call it. So they are essentially in the same boat as Polkadot for me, right? So they were the stuff back in 2022. Like they sort of came together. They were competing against each other. They both were offering interoperability and all of that mechanisms available. And I remember at that point in time, I was working with somebody who was building something on, and they were literally choosing whether do we build on some Polkadot or do we build on Matic at that point in time. And it was just one of those things that they both had the similar on paper. They both were pretty much similar, and I think what has happened is over time they've evolved similarly also. Like they haven't really gotten much development onto them. They had their own challenges. Polkadot had their own challenges, but at the end of the day, it's just the price is just speculatively moving up. Okay, they might do something great, but they haven't really delivered anything awesome as yet.
I think it'll be. I think let's try to get Sandeep Naiwal and ask him these pressing questions on the future of Polygon on the show. Why not? आ जाएगा भाई कहीं भी ये घूमता रहता है. But realist क्या
I think it
बोलता है
was
तू?
community pressure that probably got him in.
Yeah, because log obviously I'm sure Polygon has a lot of holders, जो community holders बन गए थे at the end of last bull cycle. So they must be holding, and it has a big Indian crowd, to be honest.
Oh yeah,
Polygon.
it is India's sort of play at because there are a lot of exchanges also in India. I think like stuff like Coin DCX and WazirX. I think also WazirX went bust. I don't know what these Indian exchanges are doing because in India it's so restrictive, right?
Yeah.
But Polygon was that, or Matic rather was India's sort of poster child when it comes to the blockchain ecosystem world. So yeah.
Yeah. एक Coin DCX बोला तूने तो मैंने Coin DCX का एक ad देखा था, दिखाता हूँ तेरे को, रुक जा. देखिए मेरी screen. Can you see my screen? Yes.
में जॉब है ना. अब हमने 5 BHK ले लिया है, लंबी गाड़ी ले ली है, और वो सब तो ठीक है, पर बिटकॉइन लिया क्या?
कॉइन DCX को डाउनलोड करो, 100 रुपये का फ्री बिटकॉइन एंजॉय करो.
सोचो मत डाउन.
तो अब ये Coin DCX वाले तो बहुत मतलब they're really pushing. They got Gautam Gambhir, आयुष्मान खुराना और सबको लाके
the classic Bollywood वालों को लो.
Yeah. तो इंडिया में भाई तू बिना नाच गाने के कुछ भी बेचे इंडिया में नहीं बिकेगा.
ऋतिक रोशन अपना सिग्नेचर स्टेप करके बिटकॉइन बेच देगा आगे जाके, कोई भरोसा नहीं.
Correct.
Yes.
Correct.
If you want mass adoption, you need to have like a song and dance. Like जब तक वो नहीं होगा, कोई हीरो नहीं आएगा, तब तक कोई वो नहीं करेगा. चलो आज के लिए wow, we've kept it short and sweet for the first time. Any last news or anything that you guys want to share with our audience apart from the like, comment, share and subscribe?
I have one thing. Arkundi, what were you talking about today? वो क्या था वो Reddit पे तेरा एक कोई you moderate a channel on Reddit that says doing things that are not allowed, so like eating banana from the side or eating Kit Kat diagonally.
Yes, please check out subreddit First World Anarchy, and First World Anarchist actually. So it's about standing up to the Matrix, which is my background. And I'm subscribed to Andrew Tatte's Hustle University. So James when Andrew Tatte sab same us pe hi hai. So we will not listen to the system. So if somebody asks me why am I eating banana sideways, like this is the response.
So when you say eating sideways, please explain it's from your mouth, right?
समझ लो भाई.
Sideways कैसे खाते हैं दिखा?
मैं ऐसे खाता हूँ. Stop me. तो छोटी खुशियां like सॉक्स पे लेफ्ट राइट लिखा है तो लेफ्ट वाला राइट पैर में डाल दिया, राइट वाला लेफ्ट पैर में फोटो लेके डाल दिया, like come fight me bro, like
Of course.
चलो भाई, it is a good time to end the podcast. Please like, share, comment
before the show goes sideways. Yeah.
Yes, like, share, comment, subscribe, और क्या हम demonetize हो जाए adult content के लिए.
वो तो
Ring the bell icon, please.
जैसे ही कुणाल पतला हो जाएगा उसके बाद जब बंदी आएंगी फिर like turn into OnlyFans stream, so new audience unlocked.
Yes. All right. Adios.
चलो.
Adios.